Yo, what's up guys? Blake here bringing you a max balance gear and deck setup video. In today's video, I'm basically just going to be going over all the different gear setups that you can use and some deck combinations that work really well. So let's just get right into it. I've been doing super good on this character, just having a blast, and I feel like balance is the most rewarding school right now. And what I mean by that is basically when you win matches, it feels like you deserve it, and when you lose matches, you deserve it. You know what I mean? That's not the case always. Of course, there's RNG and, you know, whether or not you're good or not at the school, but it really does feel like you control the match, and the outcome of the match is really based on how well you played and how well you control the match. So these are the stats that I like to rock. These are my favorite stats, and they're amazing, honestly. You get 9,000 health, which is pretty crazy for balance, 136 damage, which is a lot, 62 pierce to combo with it, 22 accuracy, which is more than enough if you accuracy enchant your pops, which I will show you later in the side deck. And then you got 12% critical, which really doesn't matter at all. I critical way more than I should already. But yeah, you don't need critical. 21% block, 36% pierce, which is really nice for a setup like this, and I'm not even using a pierce mount or the Shane amulet, so you guys will see the setup's really good. And then you've got 96 pips, which is a little bit low. Typically I don't like having pips this low, but with this setup it works, and I enjoy it personally. And then you've got 81% pip conserve with 101 shad rating. So where this setup really shines is that you're basically tanky while still having good damage and good pierce and being able to control the match. Pip conserve is one of the most underrated stats because a lot of spells that you use, like mana burn or, you know, gaze, stuff like that, it allows you to basically be able to combo ways that you wouldn't be able to before. So pip conserve is definitely a really good stat for a school like balance, and it definitely just makes the whole setup a lot better, not to mention all these other stats working together and making it really juicy. So the gear that I like to use for the hat is the Malister hat. I literally don't have another hat for balance, and I wouldn't recommend one. You could go for a glass cannon build and use like Dragoon's hat, for example, but this hat is so good for balance. It's better than the Croc hat. It just gives you amazing pips, pierce, good shad rating, health, damage, all that stuff. Mally hat is the way to go. For the robe, I love the turquoise robe. The other robe that I would recommend, well, there's three that you can use, but the other one I would recommend is the Tenny robe, which is on the left. I love the turquoise robe because it really fits my playstyle. I hate relying on critical. I hate just Tenny robe, just it annoys me. I don't know why, but it doesn't fit my playstyle. I don't like having that extra, like the loss of health from Tenny robe doesn't really make up for it, and shads are so inconsistent anyway. I would rather just reliably get better pips, reliably be more tanky with health, get more block, more resist, and the pierce is really nice too on a school like balance where you really don't need to strike. There are different ways of playing, but I like to play control balance where I really rely on cards like mana burn, gaze, and pop to control the tempo and control the field. So I think the turquoise robe fits balance perfectly, more than any other school in the entire game. You can use either. Malister robe is also really good if you want to go for like damage enchanted pops. You want to run a high accuracy build. That works really nicely too. But personally, I feel like just being able to have 9,000 health on a balance with really good pierce and stuff, this robe is amazing. So you can also use Tenny. Like I said, the extra damage, the extra shads is nice, but the extra pierce really makes, like with turquoise robe, if you're not striking, you're gonna do more damage than with Tenny robe if you don't critical, because that extra 4 pierce acts kind of like 8 damage, and I'm telling you, it's better. The extra pips is better. Turquoise robe is amazing. If you can get it, go for it. Otherwise, I would recommend Tenny or Malister if you want to go for a you know, accuracy, an accuracy build, so you can use damage enchanted pops. For the boots, I use Dragoon's boots. This is the best pair of boots no matter what school you're playing on at max level. Everybody uses the Dragoon boots. They're amazing. They give a ton of health, really good pips, great damage, good shads, and fantastic just in resist and everything in general. These boots are amazing. There is no alternative. For the wand, I personally recommend the Celestia Xenon Axe. I usually socket flat resist. It's just I've had to trade this wand between my fire and my balance, so I had to keep unsocketing it. But this wand is amazing. I really love this wand because it combos very, very nicely with the turquoise robe. You give up a little bit of critical, but it really doesn't matter because you're using that turquoise robe with this. So you do give up critical, but your other stats just work so nicely together. You do actually gain 1 extra damage as well. The pip conserve is really nice. You get about, I think, 6%, something like that, and then the extra shads makes up for the loss on the turquoise robe. Not to mention that you get literally free Maycast, and I've had times where I'll want it into a shield, the Maycast goes off, and it does 800 damage for no reason. So it's dumb. I'm not encouraging Maycast. I'm just saying this wand is amazing. Another alternative that you can use if you want is the Universal Balance Wand, which is, I don't even know if I have it in my backpack, actually. Yeah, I guess I don't have it on this character. But you could also use the Universal Sinbad wand, the one that gives basically 17 universal damage, 115 critical, no shads, and lower pip conserve. It's not bad, but I feel like you really don't need critical, and just being able to get those extra shads reliably in the pip conserve and the extra damage, it's just so nice. So it really comes down to personal preference of what you have, but I would recommend the Celestia Xenon Axe, which comes from the Celestia Spell Elemental pack. For the Athame Dragoon's Dagger, this is so good, gives a ton of block, really good damage, really good health. It's amazing. You could go with, you know, for example, I don't even have it actually. You could go for the Darkmoor Athame, but I really don't think it's worth. You can get more than enough pips just fine with this Athame, and the block with the health and the damage is so good. For the amulet, also again, Dragoon's Balance Charm, you could use this one, which gives you Pierce. Critical healing has been nerfed, for you guys that don't know, to basically align with critical damage, so it does only 30% increase instead of 130% increase, which is why healing just and having a critical heal setup isn't really viable anymore. Dragoon's amulet is so good. You get an extra 300 health on top of a health socket, and you get more block, and it gives you the set bonus, which allows you to get that extra 4 damage, which is huge. Sort of makes up for the lack of pierce and critical. And then even better than that, in my opinion, is the 140 pip conversion rating. That is huge for a school like Balance, where you really rely on cards like Mana Burn and Gaze. This amulet and set bonus is fantastic, so I would recommend that. I know it's a grind, but best way to do it is during double reagents. Just go hard, get a ton of reagents to craft the Dragoon's gear. Best way to do that is abandoned house. That's what I would recommend. For the ring, Duelist 100 ring, this ring is fantastic. It's about 5,500 tickets, so it's a bit of a grind. You know, you got to do some tournaments if you don't have it, but there's no alternative, right? You could use this one, the Dragoon's Balance ring, but the problem is you lose that extra pierce, and you don't need the critical, and you lose a ton of pips as well. So if you're using a critical setup, you could use this, but personally I wouldn't recommend it. I used to use it when critical heals wasn't nerfed, to use a critical balance heal build, which is a lot of fun, but until they, you know, change that, it's really not worth it. Now here's where it gets kind of interesting, is the pets. You can really do a lot of combinations with the pets and do different things. And the cool thing about Balance is it really doesn't matter what pet your stats are on. Whether you have, you know, the Flamenco Tocador, which gives you, I believe, the healing cards. Yeah, it gives you the Availing Hands. Or whether you have the Paladin or whatever this one is called that gives you the minion cards. It doesn't matter, because Balance in this meta doesn't really use any pet cards. It's not like Fire that needs Ifrit or Fire Beetle, or Ice that wants, you know, Sharpen Blade, or, you know, Ice Bird, or Death that wants Red Ghost or Sharpen, or, you know, Life that needs Sharpen, or Brown Spider. With Balance, you really do not need a pet card, so it doesn't matter what your pet is on, which allows you to use this set bonus, which is what I've been using. This one is the universal set bonus that gives you 5 universal damage, which is really nice. It complements this build really, really well, and it's definitely something you can do. You don't need it at all by any means. You can literally make your pet on anything. What you should care about more is the stats, so I'm going to show you a few pets that you can use. This is probably my favorite pet, hands down. I've been just having an absolute blast with it. You do not need Defy Brace. It actually bothers me sometimes, because I'll be like, yes, I got the punishment cast, I'm ready to go in and do damage, and then I get the brace cast when I don't need it. It takes away my damage because I'm not going to get the punishment cast, so sometimes I'd prefer not to have it. It is nice sometimes to get that brace cast, and it can, you know, be lucky and, you know, help you out in the game, but you really don't need it, so I wouldn't stress if you don't have Brace Defy. Really don't sweat it, you don't need it at all, but I would definitely recommend whatever setup you're doing on a Balance, triple damage, double resist, and a May Cast Aura. That is meta for Balance. You don't need Ward Pet, trust me. Balance does such a good job of controlling the field, and you already have really solid resist and health that you don't really need a ward. You could use a ward pet if you find yourself struggling against certain matchups, but I've found from personal experience, and I'm sure a lot of other Balances can agree with me, that having just that universal pet just is so good in every situation. So personally, my favorite Maycast Aura is Punishment. The reason for that is that it spams Punishment cast all the time. It casts a lot more than Infallible, which actually got nerfed recently because it was casting 2.5 times more than it should have, but the school auras have been untouched, so Punishment is very nice. what it basically does is that it gives you 25 extra damage, which is huge for 5 rounds. And then on top of that, I think it gives you accuracy or pips. I'm not 100% sure. You do take 5% incoming damage to the spirit schools, but that 5% damage, like, you're not gonna lose a game because they did extra damage to you in punishment. You know what I mean? So it's really, there's no downside to it. It's just a fantastic mate cast. And the reason why I prefer it over Infallible is because it casts way more. If the cast rate of Infallible and punishment were the same, I would definitely go with Infallible. But because I noticed that punishment casts probably twice as much, punishment is better. Another thing to note is that if you're in Shrike and you pierce through all the resist, Infal is not going to do anything for you. But that 25 damage from punishment will always help. So if you are hitting into resist and you don't pierce all of it, then yes, the 15 pierce from Infal is better than the 25 damage from punishment, but it doesn't make a huge difference. And if you're in Shrike and you're going for hits, that extra punishment 25 damage is huge, where the Infal won't do anything. So Infal is still a very good talent. I think people are sleeping on how good it is. It's by no means as good as it was before, but it's still a very viable talent and a good talent you can use, especially on a school like Balance, where instead of, for example, I use accuracy enchanted pops that get you pierce, but they do nowhere near as much damage as damage pops do. Even when you hitting into a shield or something, the extra damage buff that you get, I mean, look at this, 800 damage almost for 2 pips, and you break off an aura. It's just ridiculously good. So Infal is definitely still a good talent, but I would personally recommend Punishment. This is another pet that I have as well, as you can see. Another cool setup that you can use is you can actually socket Dragonlance on your pet. I have a pet like that where I socket D-Lance, and it's pretty cool on a Balance. It allows you to get better pips. As you can see, I only have 96, so having that extra 101 pips is really nice. You can, you know, rely on not pip failing, and more pips means more power, which means being able to combo more and, you know, just hit them harder. So pips is very nice. If you have D-Lance, you can also socket it, and D-Lance triggers quite a bit, so you can never go wrong with that. For the mounts, there's a few mounts you can use, but you can really use whatever you want. I use the Stompy Bronto with Sir Rocco. You like what I did there? But anyway, it's cool. Like I said, you get an extra 5 damage, but you really don't need to. You don't even need a mount at all, but all of these mounts are good. Let's say I didn't care about the set bonus. I was using, you know, my Infal pet or something like that, for example. You could socket on the Rock mount, you know, just to secure that better pip chance, get closer to 100. I would probably recommend a Rock mount with this build if you don't have the Stompy Bronto. Another good pick is the Clockwork Courser. You can never go wrong with some extra pierce, you know, go up to 38. It's always very good. And then you can also use the Balance Gulcher if you don't have anything else. You know, 2 damage is 2 damage. You could use the Crystal Unicorn to get an extra 2 accuracy. So it's okay if you don't have any of these mounts. They really don't make a big difference, but each one of them complements your playstyle in a certain way, so you could do whatever you want. But like I said, I go with the Stompy Bronto, and if I wasn't using the set bonus, I would recommend the Rock. If I wasn't using that, I would recommend Clockwork, and then after that, I would probably go with Balance Gulcher over Crystal Unicorn, because you have more than enough accuracy. But you can use this with like a Master build, Master Robe build, to make sure you get enough accuracy to reliably do damage enchanted pops, and that does a ton of damage, so that's another cool setup you can do. For the deck, I 100% recommend the Duelist Devil May Care deck at level 130. This deck is amazing. I don't think people realize how good it is. You don't get any health from it like you would in Omen, and your side deck is slightly smaller, but you really don't need more than 35 cards. It does get tricky sometimes. You know, I'll look at my side deck and I'll be like, oh, I really wish I could add, you know, an extra Hydra. I wish I could add an extra Pigs, or I wish I could put an extra Pop, or, you know, an extra Stun, whatever the case may be. But you can make it work with 35, trust me. And the reason why this deck is so good is because it gives you pip conserve. That 80 pip conserve universal is huge, because one, let's say you dispel somebody, you could get a pip conserve off that, which would literally make it a 1 pip dispel. And not just that, but that extra 80% pip conserve for your balance brings you up about 15 to 20%. As you can see with the deck on, I have 81%. If I take the deck off and I go back to pip conserve, I go to 64. So that's 17% chance of getting a pip conserve. That's almost like 1 in 5 times that you mana burn, you get a free pip back for absolutely nothing. And that can be the difference between having enough pips to combo and finish off your opponent and not being able to, and losing the game because of that. So this deck is so good. It gives good max copies. It gives the most universal critical and block of any deck, and the pip conserve is the best part. But this deck is amazing. Other things that you can use is the Balance Paradox deck. This deck is okay. You do lose a little bit of critical and block. That doesn't really matter. The big thing is that you can only do 4 main copies, 4 max copies of all the schools in your deck except for Balance, and that's bad. So the extra health might might look juicy, but trust me, it's not worth it. I would recommend Duelist 130 deck, and if you don't have that, next best up is probably Omen, and you could go with Rat, but I would grind out Duelist. It's worth it, guys. So that's my setup, and it works really nicely. I'll show you guys what the critical balance setup would, or you know, a more aggressive Tenny Robe setup would look like. But yeah, this one is by far my favorite. Alrighty, so I don't know where my wand is. I think it might be on my life or something. But if you switch from this wand to the Sinbad Universal Wand, and you switch from Turquoise Robe to the Virtuous Brigade Light Armor, whatever it's called, you go up to about 38 to 40% critical, I believe. So the reason why it only says 24 is because I'm missing the wand. But if you combo the Tenny Robe with that wand, just assume that basically this would be what your stats would look like. You would have around 8,600 health, 140 damage, because you lose 1 damage from switching wands, 61 universal resist, 27 accuracy, which is actually really nice because if you run Infal, that's perfect accuracy for pops if you damage enchant them. So you can make that work, which is pretty juicy. You would have about 40% critical, 18% block. Your pierce does go down significantly, and to me that translates to less damage, which is why I like Turquoise Robe better, not to mention the more pips, the better pierce, stuff like that. Your pips do go down significantly, down to 94. Keep in mind I'm not using Rock Mount, so you could throw that on to go to 97, but 94 pips in my opinion is way too low. And then your shads would actually be around 103 because like I said, I'm using the Celestia wand and I don't have that one. So that's what the setup would use with critical. You can make it work, and it's a really good setup as well. Having 40% critical is very good. Don't get me wrong, critical is a very, very good talent. It's just, in my opinion, it doesn't fit my playstyle, and it's just kind of annoying to rely on or to play with. You don't really feel satisfied winning off a critical. But when you're using this no critical build, or low critical build, I should say, that only is 12% when you're using Turquoise Robe and the rest of this, it's just so nice. It's so satisfying. You really don't win off of RNG a lot of the times, and most of the times you win because you play just well by, you know, controlling the field with cards like Mana Burn to make sure their pips are low and they can't combo, Gaze to keep bubble control, and then Pop, of course, to make sure that they can't get that extra damage from the aura. So yeah, that's everything for the gear. Like I said, this setup is amazing. It's got me to 1460 rank, and I don't see myself stopping anytime soon, to be honest. Maybe if I get immune sniped and stuff, but I've just been doing really good on my matches. This setup is amazing against behemoths and basically all the schools. I'd say the schools that I struggle the most against are probably Myth and Fire, just because a good Fire that Fire Elf spams is pretty difficult to beat if they have the right stats and get lucky, and Myth with Troll Spellman and Baba Yaga and Mystic is just really, really difficult. But against Ice, I do really, really well. Of course, I lose sometimes to Ices, but the majority of the time, I win to Ices. So this setup is amazing. This is the gear and the stats that I would recommend. But yeah, let's go on to the deck. So this is the deck that I've been using recently, and it works amazing for me. I have 6 stun blocks in, and you might be like, Blake, that's a ton of stun blocks. Take out like 2 of those. The reason why I have so many is because stun blocking as your first turn is usually your best move, and you want to get that tempo early in the game. Think about it, right? If you're going to stun block first turn, it's okay if you have a lot of copies, because as long as you reliably pull it, that means you have 2 whole turns before you need to get another card for turn 2, right? So let's say you're like, all right, I want to reliably pull Mana Burns or something like that, but you know you're going to stun block first turn. You get that first turn to discard everything you don't need and stun block, and then you get that second turn to draw from your main deck. So that's why I like having so many stun blocks. Yes, it does clutter up your deck a little bit, but for your first turn card that you're reliably going to want to do almost every game as your first move, it's really not that bad to have that many copies. So you could get away with 4 or 5, but I notice even when I pack in just 5, I don't reliably pull it. And then, like, let's say I'm first to a Fire and this is my deck, and all I have is like a set shield, then I have to set shield and they get good value with the Fire Elf, and you could literally lose games off of, you know, starting the game off with slow tempo or not to a good start. So that's why I like this. You could also throw in some weaknesses. I don't pack them personally, but I've been definitely thinking about doing it. I feel like that works better with the ward setup, but weakness is really good, especially against schools like Fire that spam Fire Elf and stuff like that. But anyway, for the rest of the deck, I've got a couple Storm Shields in just in case I go against a Storm, but it's pretty rare I go against them. 3 Aegis I feel works really nicely with the rest of this. I've got 3 Legend Shields. I would recommend personally packing way more of these and probably throwing in some Spirit Shields as well. But at my rank, typically the schools that I face are Ice, Fire, and then other balances. It's pretty rare that I go against Lives, Myths, Storms, and Deaths. Of course, I do get some of them, but in general, I really don't go against that many Lives or Myths, and that's why I only have 3 set shields. The other thing to remember, too, is that those matches are typically a lot faster and shields aren't as important right away as they are with an elemental school. So you could definitely pack in more of these and pack in some spirit shields, but this works for me at my rank. Adjust the set shields and stuff for your own rank. I pack in 4 thermics, which I find works perfectly with the setup. It gives me 5 fire shields and 5 ice shields, which is more than enough in my opinion. I pack in 6 mana burns. Definitely pack in at least 6 burns. I would never pack anything less than this, so definitely go with that. I pack in max bubbles, and I find that it really works for me. You really don't need to hoard all of them, so if you find that you have 3 bubbles in your hand, you don't need to keep them. But I really like having so many bubbles because it gives me a card that I can, you know, safely discard to pull from my side deck, and it also is just really important to keep that bubble control as a balance, and that's the reason why balance is a top tier school in my opinion, because before the balance bubble came into play, Balance was easily one of the worst schools. It was a bottom tier school next to Storm and Life, and now it's arguably like a top tier school. So definitely recommend packing max of those. I do keep in 1 Balance Dispel, but Balance Dispel is kind of weird because you really only use it if they Shrike, since you're not going to be overtiming them. And if they Shrike, they can just want it, and if they want it, it actually casts a Balance Pierce Blade, which takes off the Dispel. So if you Dispel them, you have to waste 2 pips and your turn, and all they do is basically lose a turn of Shrike, which obviously comes in handy sometime, but they won't take any more backlash and they don't lose any pips. So oftentimes Balance the Spell, even if you can do it and they aren't Strike, it's not your best move, but it's good to pack one just in case. I have 3 strikes. I really rarely strike, but of course it comes in handy. And then I've got 2 chimeras, which are really nice for minion killers. Sometimes I even pack in some scorpions. It's just I don't have enchants, and it's pretty rare that people minion against me. But you could throw in a couple of these if you find yourself at low rank and find people doing this a lot. So throw in some scorpions as you want. You could even throw some enchants, but I just feel like it clogs the deck. I like to keep a nice small deck with everything that I need, and then definitely pack in max wand hits. If they're universal, or it doesn't even matter what school it is, because you're just going to be breaking off tower shields, pack in maximum wand hits. A 0-hit shield breaker is so good, and for a school like Balance, it's amazing. So yeah, and then here's my side deck real quick. You might be like, Blake, are you crazy? Why do you have 8 tower shields and 4 triages? Again, 2 things very important to remember is 1, what rank are you and what kind of opponents are you facing, and 2, how do you play, what is your playstyle, and how do you cycle. At my rank, I face a ton of balances, which is why having tower shields is extremely important, especially when you have an aura pet. You don't want to, you know, not be able to pull a tower shield. They end up popping you for 2,000, and then you just lose the game off that. So that's why I carry so many, and it works with my deck. I carry a lot of triages because, like I said, I face a ton of ices, and this is how I win games, is off triage. Is going for a shield, forcing them to have to give up their blade or to give up their buffs to overtime me, and then getting value by getting rid of it with 0 pips. So triage is huge. That's why so much of my deck is comprised of these 2 cards. It works for me. You can definitely switch it up. I would recommend packing at least 6 tower shields and at least 3 triages, but those last 3 slots you could do really whatever you want, depending on the kind of opponents that you face. I do pack in 1 Enfeeble. It is rare that I use it, but when I do use it, I would have lost if I didn't, if that makes sense. It's kind of like Sirocco. It's one of those cards where you're not going to find yourself using it too often or needing it that often, but when you do need it, it will bail you out and save you the game a lot of the time. So I like to pack in a little, a little bit of utility basically. Definitely want to pack in a stun. The Enfeeble is nice, and then you really don't need Sirocco. I would recommend packing 2 big weakness debuff hits, so either 2 King Artorias, 2 Siroccos, or 1 and 1. I personally like to do 1 of each just to switch it up a little bit, and because sometimes King Artorias is better than Sirocco if you don't need that big debuff, but you do want that extra damage in the Pierce Blade. So I like 1 of each. I pack in 5 gazes because with my playstyle, like I said, I don't really strike, so this is the main thing I use shads on. Even though it really won't do that much damage, the fact that you can break a shield, get rid of their damage buff from the bubble, and put up yours just provides so much value. I have 1 Hydra in. The reason why I only pack in 1 Hydra is because I don't have an Amplify pet. That's another thing I forgot to say earlier. If you have an Amplify pet, that's also really good, but I don't have one personally. If you do have an Amplify pet, it allows you to really get value out of things like Gaze, Hydra, Chimera, stuff like that. But I play kind of control, tank, defensive balance, and this just works for me. 2 Judgments, definitely want at least 2 of these. Very good card that's used situationally, but can literally be the difference between you winning and losing the game. Same with Lore Master. I would definitely recommend packing in 1 of these. You might be like, Lore Master is horrible, and yeah, it's not that great, but it is situational. Sometimes you do the math and you realize that that little extra 15 weakness weakness prevents you from dying, but it does enough damage to them that you can kill them or breaks a shield that you needed to break off. So the value that it provides is still there, even though it's not as much as before, and it is very situational. The mantle also, sometimes if that's your only move where you have to break a shield and then need to fizzle, you can send it, but most of the time I use this for minion killers, and if I know that that little extra weakness would make me feel more comfortable in playing aggressive later in the game. Lore Master is definitely not an early game card. It's kind of it should typically be your second to last move or a minion killer. I pack in 1 picks, you could pack in more, but I typically don't strike, and I get most of my damage done with cards like Gaze, Pop, Worm, and Mana Burn. So that's why I only have 1. I pack in 3 worms, but sometimes I pack in 4 and, you know, take out a triage or a tower shield depending on the kind of opponents I'm facing. And then I pack in 6 pops. Having 6 pops is crucial. Sometimes I even feel like I need more than that because it's just so good. It's an amazing card. It literally does more damage per pip than like an epic enchanted. It does like the same damage per pip as a epic enchanted lightning elf. I mean, an epic enchanted lightning bats, right? And then on top of that, you have an extra 15 pierce because it's pierce enchanted. It just doesn't display, and you take away a buff. So it's unbelievably good. I really strongly recommend packing at least 6 in your deck, but it depends what kind of opponents you're facing, that kind of thing. And then I would recommend accuracy enchanting them unless you are using an infallible pet or you are using like Malistaire Robe and, you know, getting 35 plus accuracy. Otherwise, accuracy enchanted and pierce enchanted pop is the way to go. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I really wanted to go into detail because I feel the most comfortable with balance right now in this meta. It feels just the most natural and fluid, and there's so much less RNG involved with balance than a lot of the other schools. Of course, at max level right now with this meta, there's just a ton of RNG, but with balance, it really feels that you're able to control the match and control the tempo, and if you're able to do that successfully, you win the game, and if you do it unsuccessfully, then you lose the game. So I hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys are new, make sure to drop a sub because I do upload new videos every single day, and I will see you guys in the next one. As always, peace out, guys.